Hello students, we are going to take up the last lecture on the present topic of FEM formulation for a bar element. To illustrate the techniques and the methods which have been developed, we are going to take an example of a bar uh, which has been loaded by a triangular loading. As can be seen from the figure, the coordinate system of the problem is acting towards the positive axis is towards the right. The beam is from point A to B and it has been loaded by a triangular loading, but the direction of the load happens to be directed towards the negative x-axis. The intensity of the UDL of the loading is proportional to the distance itself, that is given by minus 10 x pounds per inch. And since the length of the beam happens to be 10 inches, it means that at the right end of the beam, that is at point B, the intensity of the load happens to be uh, minus 600 pounds per inch. Now for this particular problem, we are going to find the displacement of the bar element. Obviously point B is constrained, therefore there won't be any deformation or displacement at point B or the node located at point B, and only the remaining nodes are going to undergo displacements. So for this particular data, that is elasticity is given, area of cross section is given, we are supposed to find the solution using uh, a number of elements. The first case is going to be when the entire beam has been divided, entire bar has been divided into a single element. Then we are going to divide the bar into two elements and so on. And then we are going to obtain the solution using the exact methods also, so that we can compare the FEM solution with the numerical solution obtained with FEM. So the first case represents when the bar has been um, analyzed for a one element solution. So we already know this particular formula number one. This in fact we have derived in the earlier classes using the potential energy approach. In this particular expression, um, the n represents the shape function or the interpolation function. Of course, the transpose of this shape function is supposed to be taken, and the Ts represents the loading which is going to be present on the bar. And then we are supposed to integrate the entire uh, formula to give the uh, node, to give the forces acting on the two nodes. So since we know the expression for shape functions, and since shape functions have been represented by a row matrix, and as we are taking its transform, therefore the transform of the shape matrix is going to appear as a column matrix, and minus 10x happens to be the intensity of loading. The entire thing is going to be integrated from 0 to L, that is the length of the domain. And when you carry out the when you carry out the mathematical requirements, what we get is the forces acting on the two nodes. As you can very well see that the forces which we have obtained um, are acting towards the left hand side. Obviously they are supposed to be acting towards the left because the loading on the beam, loading of the on the bar itself is acting towards the left. And since we know the stiffness, we can very well find the value of U1, which comes out to be minus 0.006 inches. U2 obviously is unknown. U2 obviously is a known parameter, but since the reaction at point B is not known, we are basically using the first equation to find the value of u1, because in the first equation we know the value of u2, which practically means that there is only one unknown in the first expression. But in the second equation, the value of u1 and the r reaction at point number 2, both of them happens to be unknown, therefore we cannot use equation number 2. But once u1 has been found, obviously then we can find the value of reaction existing at node number 2. So a simple illustration gives us uh, the um, solution, required solution. Then in the next slide, we are going to, obviously this can be used to find the expressions for value of stress. This comes out to be 2000 Pascal per square pounds per square inch. Now one thing should be noticed over here, that since when we are dividing the entire domain with the help of a single element, and that particular element also happens to be a linear element, it basically means that we are representing the displacement in this element by a linear function. That is, u is represented by a linear function. And since strain is given by du by dx, it practically means that the value of strain is going to be a constant quantity throughout the entire domain, which in turn means that stress itself is going to be a constant quantity throughout the domain. It is only, this is because the displacement has been taken as a linear function. Therefore, stress and strain, both of them, because they depend upon the first differential of displacement, both of them are going to be constant quantities throughout the entire domain. Now, this obviously is a wrong answer, but the thing is that as we are going to go on refining the domain into a larger number of elements, we are actually going to approach towards the exact solution. Uh, so, unless you basically do the process of mesh refining, you should not assume that the solution which you are getting is a correct solution or it is anywhere near to the exact solution. It is only when the mesh refining has been carried out, you basically approach towards the exact solution. And also please note that you are never going to get the exact solution, but the solution which you are getting is going to approach the exact solution as you carry out the process of mesh refining. Now when you divide the entire domain into two elements, we have element number, we have a additional node which is located exactly at the center, but this actually is not a requirement. You could have located node number C anywhere depending upon your requirement or your convenience. But in the present case, the domain has been divided into two equal elements represented by AC and CB. So as you can see that the loading in element number 1 is still is a triangular loading, but in node number element number 2, that is from C to B, the loading happens to be a summation of a triangular load plus a rectangular load. These two loads are supposed to be added up together to get the exact loading on the second element, but that can be carried out easily. For this particular case, uh, displacement at node B obviously is unknown. You are going to get three equations uh, which are supposed to be solved together to get the displacement at node located at A and node located at C. In this particular case, the displacement at node 1, which is at point A, is coming out to be 0.006, which happens to be the same value as has been obtained in the previous case. U2, that is displacement at node C, comes out to be minus 0.00525 inches. Displacement at node B obviously is 0 because it happens to be a constrained node. Now once these two values have been found, you can actually find out the value of stresses in element number 1 and element number 2. Um, it is worth repeating that the value of stress which is going to be found for element number 1 now is going to have a constant stress which is going to be different for element number 2, which in turn has a constant stress. What I want to say is that both the elements are now being subjected to constant stresses, which basically are not equal. So these are the value of stresses: 750 psi, and for the other element it is 5250 psi. Now in this slide, in the remaining slide, we are going to obtain the solutions using higher number of elements, and then we will compare the solutions obtained with respect to the exact solution. So this is the bar. The coordinate system has been located uh, at the fixed point of the bar, but actually it could have been located anywhere. And the exact solution happens to be a cubic solution indicated in red at the bottom. And once you are dividing the element in a in one you are dividing the domain in one element, this is the solution which you get. Obviously, since there is only one element and the element itself happens to be a linear element, therefore the solution is going to be represented by a straight line. For two elements, we have another solution. For four elements, we have yet another solution. And if you just look at the graphs closely, you can obviously observe that at the nodes, you are practically getting the solution which is going to be obtained by the exact solution also. That is, at the nodes, the FEM solution and the exact solution, they are basically the same. But the maximum error in the solution of displacement is located at the center of the element. The maximum error, that is the maximum difference between the exact solution and the FEM solution, the maximum difference between these two solutions is present at the center of the element itself. Obviously, this maximum error goes on decreasing as the domain is being divided into higher number of elements. Now, this can be observed very easily when you are working with two elements and when you are working with four elements. The maximum error is reducing. And obviously, you can go on carrying, you can go on dividing the domain into a higher number of elements till you get the accuracy which you desire for your application. The finite element solutions match the exact solutions at the node points. There is a linear field displacement within each element. Though the nodal values of displacement match the exact solution, solution for 1 and 2 elements give poor value of displacement at locations between the nodes. That is, the maximum error is located at the center of the element, that is between the nodes. because we are using a linear displacement function within each element, whereas the exact solution is a cubic function. This observation is important. The one and two element solutions could have given a better result at locations between the nodes if quadratic elements were used to represent the displacement. The thing is that the maximum error is located at the center of the element. This is because of the particular type of element which we have chosen for our present solution, which happens to be a linear element. But if in place of a linear element, if we had taken a quadratic element, then this means that at center of each element there would have been a third node also, which in turn is going to mean that the maximum error is now not going to be at the center of the element, but is now going to be at some other location, because we are now taking a third node in the element. Because we are taking a quadratic element, the maximum error is now not going to be at the center of the element, but is now going to be at some other location. However, because we are using increasing number of elements, the finite element solution converges to the exact solution. Now, this is independent to the type of element which you are choosing. The finite element is going to converge to the exact solution even if you are taking linear elements, and obviously even if you are taking quadratic elements. If the theory of FEM is being applied properly, then irrespective of the type of element which you are taking, the FEM solution is going to converge to the exact solution, which means that the mesh refinement is a very important aspect of FEM. The conditions to be met for this obviously is that there should not be any programming error, computational error, the theory of FEM should be properly applied, and shape function should be properly chosen, and things like that. Now, this is also important, as the exact solution is a cubic function. Since in the exact solution there happens to be a term denoted by x raised to power 3, the exact solution happens to be a cubic function. This means that if the displacement was approximated by a cubic function, if the displacement field in the element was approximated by a cubic function, that is, if we had taken a 4-noded element, then a single element could have given the exact solution. This particular point is very important. That is, which basically means that you could have obtained the exact solution using only one element. But this particular condition is going to be met only if the element which you now are going to take for the solution is a cubic element. Because in this particular case, when you take a cubic element, the displacement field of the element becomes cubic, and the exact solution itself happens to be a cubic solution. So you can practically obtain the exact solution using the using only one element. Now in the next slide, we are going to plot the variations of stresses with respect to the length. So we have the bar, we have a coordinate system, and then we have the exact solution. Since the displacement expression happens to be cubic, the stress obviously is going to be represented by a quadratic equation, which is 2.5 x square, almost like a parabola. And once, for the first case, when we are taking the single element, it means that the entire bar is going to be subjected to a same level of stresses. This means that the stress is not varying as a function of x. It is a constant value throughout. But if we are taking two elements, the stress is going to be constant within each element itself. So we have two levels of stresses. Similarly, for 4, we have 4 levels of stresses. Now, obviously, if you compare this particular, if you see this graph closely, you can very well see that the value of stress, the maximum error in the value of stress is now at the node itself. The maximum error in the value of stress is now at the node itself and is not present and is not at the center of the element. This means that when you are talking about error in the solution for the displacement, the nodes give you a better approximation and the maximum error is in between the element. But when you're talking about stresses or when you're talking about strains, the maximum error is is going to be at the nodes, and a much better value of stresses or strains is going to be obtained at a value at a location between the element. So so this means that whensoever you are finding displacements, you look at the nodal value. But when you are interested in finding strains, you find the strain at the center of the element and not at the nodes. So this is what it represents. The other point to be seen is the next point is going to be clear when you um see the solution for a two-noded element. When you see the solution for a two-noded element, uh, um, the two elements are in contact at the center of the domain. The two elements are in contact at the center of the domain, which means that corresponding to the figure on display, the left hand part of the domain is subjected to a smaller stress and the right hand part is subjected to a larger stress, which obviously means that there is a stress discontinuity. Okay, on the left we have a smaller value of stresses, on the right we have a larger value of stresses. So obviously when we are talking about a 4-element solution, there are going to be 3 locations of stress discontinuities. And as you go on refining the domain, obviously you can see that this particular stress discontinuity goes on decreasing. And as you further go on refining the domain, what basically you are going to get is stress discontinuity distributed over the entire domain. but these discontinuities are going to be of very small values. Okay, these discontinuities are going to be of very small values. So this is what you can interpret from the present graph. The stress is derived from the slope of a displacement curve. Therefore, by the finite element solution, because u is the linear function in each element, axial stress is a constant value in each element. It then takes even more elements to model the first derivative of the displacement function, or equivalently axial stress. This is shown where the best result occurs for the four element solution. The best approximation of stress occurs at the midpoint of the element and not at the nodes. For the case of displacement, the best solution occurs at the nodes. But for the case of stress, which happens to depend upon derivative of the displacement, the best solution occurs at the middle of the element and not at the nodes. This is because the derivative of displacement is better predicted between the nodes than at the nodes themselves. The stress is not continuous across element boundaries. This obviously we have seen for the two element solution and obviously for the four element solution also. The stress on the left is different compared to the stresses existing on the right of the domain, which basically means that the stresses are not continuous, they are discontinuous. Therefore, equilibrium is not satisfied across element boundaries. As the number of elements used increases, the discontinuity in the stress decreases across element boundaries and the approximation of equilibrium improves. Please note that we are never going to satisfy equilibrium. Even if we go on refining the mesh, we are never going to satisfy equilibrium. Equilibrium is going to be satisfied only when the stresses acting towards the left and the stresses acting towards the right, both of them balances each other. But we are never going to satisfy equilibrium even when we go on refining the mesh. But the thing is that the approximation of equilibrium improves. Now in the remaining slides we are going to apply the Galerkin weighted residual method for the uh, governing equation at hand. This basically, the steps which are going to be done have basically been dealt earlier also, where we took a second order equation and did the entire formulation of the Galerkin approach using the reduction from the second to the first order approximation by using integration by parts method. The same steps are going to be repeated here also, though it is not necessary, but still for the sake of completeness, we are dealing this. These are basically the definitions of residual methods which we have already covered. So there is no point in explaining them. We may just go on reading them at our leisurely pace. In this particular equation, R represents the residual, and we are carrying out the integration throughout the domain of the throughout the entire domain, and this integrated value is supposed to be minimized. For the bar, the basic differential equation is given by equation number 1, which obviously is a second order differential equation, almost similar to what we had taken earlier. In this expression, A obviously represents the cross-section area of the domain, E is the elasticity, and U represents the displacement field. Now for Galerkin approach, we are supposed to multiply the governing equation with the shape functions and integrate it over the domain. This basically is going to give you a set of linear simultaneous equations which are supposed to be solved together for finding the value of displacements, for which obviously we are going to use the integration by parts approach. So we have two functions of x, a and b, two functions a and b, both are functions of x. And when you differentiate this, you get equation number 2. And when you carry out the integration of equation number 2, we get equation number 3. And since on the left hand side, we have function ab which has been differentiated and then it has been integrated. Therefore, on the left, we get the function ab itself, but now they are supposed to be evaluated at the endpoints and then they are supposed to be subtracted together. This is what is represented. This is what is written in equation number 4. Now, using equation number 4, we are going to reduce the order of the second order governing equation which was on the display previously. So, we have equation 1 which in fact has been carried forward from the previous slide, and this is equation number 2 is the required governing equation which represents the deformation of a bar. And if you compare equation 1 with equation 2, you can very well see that B can be represented as the shape function. This is when you are comparing equation number 2 with the second term in the right hand side of equation number 1. If you compare these two terms, B comes out to be Ni and A comes to be equal to Ae multiplied by du by dx. Now for this value of A and B, these value of A and B are going to be substituted in equation number 1 itself to get expression number 5. And here you can very well see that in expression number 5, the second term on the right hand side in expression number 5 the second term in the right hand side is the same term which has been written in equation number 2. So now we have equation number 5 from the previous slide carried forward, and this becomes equation number 1 for the present slide, and we simply rearrange the terms of equation number 1 to give equation number 2 in this form. Please note that in equation number 1, the left hand side represents the uh, the governing equation multiplied by the weighted multiplied by the shape function. Now this thing has to be minimized. Therefore, it is going to have a value 0, which means that the terms on the right hand side, both the terms on the right hand side can be adjusted to take a form of the second equation. Now, if you see the second equation, the term on the left basically is a first order differential of unknown. It contains du by dx. Therefore, it is the first order, which means that the second order differential is now replaced by the first order. That is one advantage of Galerkin approach. The highest order terms get reduced by the lower order term. And the second advantage is that there now exists a term on the right, which in fact is a boundary term. The term AE du by dx into Ni. This is a term which has to be evaluated at the boundaries, that is at node x2, that is at x2 and at x1, and then they are supposed to be subtracted with respect to each other. So this boundary term also appears because of the reduction of the second order to the first order. So these two are the advantages of Galerkin approach. The other advantage obviously is, which is not apparent over here, that by this reduction you are going to get a symmetrical stiffness matrix, but this we are going to illustrate in the future classes. In fact, it has been illustrated in the previous classes also, where the Galerkin method was taken up for the first time. For the time being, we are continuing with equation number 2. This is the expression for the displacement field. N is the shape function matrix. D is the matrix representing the degrees of freedom. In fact, N is a row vector, row matrix, and D is a column matrix. This is shape function number 1, shape function number 2 in equation number 5. And since we are going to require du by dx, therefore we are differentiating equation number 3 to get equation number 6. And equation number 7 is just equivalent of equation number 6, but it is now in a matrix form. So now we have equation number 1, that is the required equation which we are supposed to solve, and then we have in equation number 2 a du by dx. Now in this equation we have simply substituted the value of du by dx in the left hand side. We are not substituting it in the right, we are substituting it in the left hand side. Then for I to be 1, we get the first equation. The right hand side have been simplified, and since shape function number 1 is 0, uh, shape function number 1 is 0 at x is equal to L. Therefore, one of these two terms disappears, and since n1 obviously is 1 at x is equal to 0, therefore n1 is being replaced by 1. We get minus ae du by dx at x is equal to 0. And since du by dx represents a strain, which when multiplied by E gives you stress, which when multiplied by A give you force. The term on the screen now is basically force at location x is equal to 0. So this becomes F1x. Please note that the negative sign has disappeared. Why it has disappeared? This you can find out using the elementary theory of SOM. And similarly, for I to be 2, we get equation number 5. So we have two equations, equation number 1 and equation number 2. And we are going to solve equation number 1. And since in equation number 1, all the terms happen to be constant, since L is known, L is the length of the element, all the terms happen to be constant, so they have been kept outside the integral term. The only term which is now going to be left within the integration is going to be dx itself. And when you carry out the required integration, you get equation number 4, and then equation number 5, which on further simplification gives you equation number 6. This equation number 6 is the is what you get for I to be 1, and similarly for I to be 2, you get equation number 7. And these two expressions, these two equations can be substituted can be represented in a matrix form, and they basically are the same equations as have been derived earlier. So this is all about the Galerkin approach, which has been applied for the bar element. As an assignment from the present chapter, kindly study other residual methods and their application to one-dimensional bar problem.